My promise to you is this. I did not come into politics to raise taxes on working people. But we had a commitment in our manifesto not to increase taxes on working people.
This is a death by 1,000 taxes, £26 billion worth to be precise. Rachel Reeves has delivered the toughest budget in over a decade.
This morning, we have seen an unprecedented leak.
It's crazy. It was leaked by the OBR an hour before she announced it, sending the markets into turmoil.
The Office for Budget Responsibility have already made a statement taking full responsibility for their breach.
Taxes are rising, thresholds are frozen, welfare costs are climbing, and debt interest is spiralling.
A Labour budget with Labour values delivering for the British people.
Here's exactly how the government is balancing its budget by stretching yours.
We are rebuilding our economy.
This is everything you need to know about today's budget. Let's break it down step by step.
Labour will not put up your income tax, national insurance or VAT.
Are you about to break your manifesto pledges? Why are you about to freeze tax thresholds when you said you wouldn't? How can voters trust you, Chancellor?
Hi, I'm Dr. Vinay Raniga, a former political leadership scholar here at the University of Oxford. And this channel breaks down politics and the economy in a way that actually makes sense. Please hit subscribe and hit that bell so we can keep making videos just like this. Today we're going to highlight what the budget really means with 3 clean sections. 1, how the government will raise money from you. 2, how the government will spend your money. And 3, bringing it all together, what this really means for you and your family. Let's get into it.
My choices are a budget for fair taxes, strong public services and a stable economy. That is the Labour choice.
Look, the Chancellor starts from a bad place. First thing is that productivity has flatlined since 2008. If the pre-financial crisis trend had continued, the UK would be about 23% richer than today. Instead, we're stuck with low productivity, low growth and lower wages than we would have otherwise had. Second, the latest OBR forecast is worse than expected. They say real GDP will grow by only 1.5% a year on average, which is slower than they predicted in March. Lower growth means less money coming in and almost no fiscal room to act. The third is that government debt is stuck at around 95 to 97% of GDP, and the interest bill on that debt is forecast to stay around 3.7 to 3.9% of the economy, which is more than we spend on defence. Before Reeves even spends a pound, a huge part of tax revenue is already locked in paying interest.
1 in every £10 that government spends is on debt interest.
That means low growth, high debt, high interest costs, and this is why the budget feels so painful. Before we talk about how taxes are rising, note that the OBR now expects the overall tax take to rise from 35% of GDP today to around 38% by 2030-2031, the highest burden in modern peacetime. Most of that increase comes from taxes on people's work and pay, not from some new wealth tax. Let's get into it.
I can confirm that I will not be increasing national insurance, the basic, higher or additional rates of income tax or VAT.
This is the core of the tax rise in the budget. Reeves has frozen the main income tax thresholds until April 2031. This means your pay can go up, prices can go up, but the line where tax kicks in does not move. So each time you get a pay rise, a bigger slice of it is taxed. Some people are dragged into paying more income tax for the first time. Others get pulled into a higher tax band. The OBR shows the impact clearly. Personal taxes overall rise by £15 billion a year by the end of the decade. Income tax freezes alone raise £8 billion in 29-30. About 780,000 more people become basic rate taxpayers, 920,000 more people become higher rate taxpayers, and 4,000 more people move into the additional top rate of tax. And none of this requires raising the headline tax rate, it just happens quietly. Then come the extra measures. Reeves is raising tax rates on dividends property income and saving income by 2 percentage points. That raises another £2.1 billion. Remember, we're going for 26 billion. From April 2029, salary sacrifice pension contributions above £2,000 a year will face national insurance tax. This raises another £4.7 billion a year for the Treasury. Pension providers warned that this would hurt long-term savings, but Reeves went ahead anyway. The cash ISA limit falls to £12,000 a year rather than £20,000 a year. And because the state pension rises by 4.8% next April, more pensioners, your mum and dad, will be pulled over the frozen personal allowance and start paying income tax for the first time. This is why economists call it a stealth tax. The rate stays the same, but the bill does not. Then we have the smaller, messy taxes. This is the death by 1,000 taxes. Because Labour promised not to raise the main rate of income tax, VAT or national insurance, they have boxed themselves in. So the rest of the budget is full of smaller taxes and tweaks that can add up, but also cost them politically. Things like a new high value property charge on homes worth more than £2 million, a mansion tax raising around £400 million, a new pay per mile tax for electric vehicles from April 2028 at 3 pence per mile for electric cars and 1.5 pence per mile for plug-in hybrids. A tourism tax, £2 per night on hotels and Airbnb stays, especially in cities like London. A milkshake tax on sugary, dairy and coffee drinks. Fuel duty is frozen for another 5 months or so. Higher gambling duties online, except for bingo. And VAT enforcement and digital clampdowns, lower ISA allowances, VAT on private hire journeys like Ubers, carbon pricing and vehicle excise tweaks. Each one raises a small amount and together they raise billions of pounds. But they also make the system more complicated and unpredictable. This is what the CBI meant when they warned about death by 1,000 taxes for both businesses and also the Labour Party. Let's also dive into the mansion tax problem. Reeves does not call it a mansion tax, but that's how it works. Homes worth more than £2 million will face a higher council tax through new bans. On paper, this sounds like taxing the very rich. In reality, in some parts of the country, £2 million buys you a huge house. But in parts of London and other big cities, 2 million is normally a normal flat. That means many owners who are older people who are very asset rich, their property's worth over 2 million, but cash poor will suffer. And all that noise will only raise a few £100 million a year. I know that's a lot, a few £100 million a year, but compared to £1 trillion, it's a tiny amount for the government to raise to deal with the political backlash of this. So there'll be a lot of political anger for not very much money. This happened similarly with the winter fuel payments and also with the farmer's inheritance that she did last year and in the spring budget.
These reforms improve our welfare system. They support our young people, protect those who need it most, and put an end to conservative waste and unfairness.
So how will the government spend your money? Welfare spending is rising by more than £9 billion. This is one of the biggest stories of the budget. By the end of the decade, the government will spend more than £9 billion extra every year on welfare payments. A large part of this comes from scrapping the two-child benefit cap. For those of you who don't know, the two-child cap is a rule that limits child benefits to the first 2 children in the family, meaning parents receive no extra support for the third or subsequent child. According to the OBR, scrapping the cap costs around £3 billion per year, increases support for around 560,000 families, boosts their income by an average of £5,310, and this also helps lift around 350,000 children out of poverty. We'll talk about the moral argument a bit later on. On top of that, backtracking on winter fuel payment reforms and also the other welfare reforms that Labour wanted to do but the backbenchers rebelled against will add another £7 billion to the bill. Benefits are also rising in line with inflation and universal credit caseloads are still climbing, meaning more expense for the government. A big one is also the state pension going up by 4.8% next April. There's also energy bills and the cost of living. Reeves announced a small set of measures to ease pressure. Some green levies are being removed from energy bills, which will give families £150. Rail fares are frozen for another year, NHS prescriptions are also being frozen, and the national living wage rises to £12.71 for over 21s. About £1.3 billion is being invested into electric vehicle grants and charging infrastructure. These help a little, but they do not offset the larger tax rises I mentioned earlier. Now let's talk about public services. The government will spend nearly £3 billion over the next 2 years on NHS redundancies and new youth employment schemes. £300 million also goes into NHS technology. But Reeves claims she will cut spending by £4 billion in the final year of the decade to make the numbers all add up. The OBR hints that this is unlikely to happen, which means more financial pressure later on in the decade. There is also a new major cost coming from the government's digital identity plans. The OBR says the move for mandatory digital IDs from 2029 will cost £1.8 billion over the next 3 years. That's £600 million a year.
Even after these reforms, 90% of taxpayers will still pay no tax at all on their savings.
Now let's go into what it actually means for you. Let's start with workers. If you're working in a normal job, you've lost big time in this budget. Because thresholds are frozen until April 2031, millions will drift into a higher tax band whether their standards of living rise or not. You'll pay more tax even though your rate of tax doesn't change. Pay rises will feel smaller and higher earners will get pushed up faster into higher bands. The cash ISA limit's also lower for your investments and dividend and saving taxes are higher. Pension savings will also become less generous after £2,000. There's also a hidden risk in the minimum wage rise. Raising the national living wage to £12.71 sounds like a win, but for many young workers it could mean a true wage of £0. Both the Bank of England and the ONS have warned that rising labour costs, along with the £25 billion rise in employer national insurance from Reeves's first budget, are already destroying jobs. Britain now has one of the highest minimum wages in the world, but some of the lowest productivity in the G7. That gap is not sustainable, and Reeves unfortunately has done nothing today to fix it. So what if you're a pensioner? Pensioners get a state pension rise, prescription freezes, and rail fare freezes. But many will start paying income tax for the first time because thresholds are frozen. Winter fuel payments changes were reversed after the anger, but the welfare system keeps expanding, which adds pressure later on. So how about if you're a parent? Scrapping the 2-child benefit cap is one of the biggest changes in this budget. It costs around £3 billion a year and increases support for 560,000 families by more than £5,000 each year on average. But the politics is really surprising. Only 1/3 of Labour voters in 2024 support removing the cap, and half of them want to keep it. Nearly 60% of the public also supports keeping it, which seems slightly odd. This is because it's a moral and political divide. Opponents of the cap say it punishes children for circumstances they didn't choose and actually deepens child poverty. Supporters say it's about fairness to taxpayers who actually think about their families very carefully and the affordability versus those that don't. And part of this cost is also funded by pension salary sacrifice tax changes that hits many savers, which people feel is also unfair. There's also a small but symbolic win for children. The government is putting £5 million into creating new school libraries and another £18 million into improving playgrounds across the country. I know these are small sums of money in the context of the full budget, £1 trillion, but they matter for children who have lost access to safe spaces and reading facilities in the recent years. What if you own a house? Homes worth more than £2 million face a surcharge from 2028, the mansion tax. This only raises £400 million but creates large political anger. First-time buyers get some support through planning reforms, potential stamp duty tweaks, and changes to the lifetime ISA penalty, but none of this solves the housing crisis. If you drive a car, drivers get a short-term freeze in fuel duty, but there are long-term costs coming up. From 2028, electric cars pay 3% per mile and plug-in hybrids 1.5% per mile, and transport costs for drivers rise across the board in general. And what about day-to-day life? There's a tourism tax that adds £2 per night on hotels and rental. Sugary coffee drinks become more expensive due to the milkshake tax. Alcohol, tobacco and vaping duty also rises. Digital taxes and online gambling duties also increase, so life becomes a little more expensive in almost every direction.
Those are my choices. Not austerity, not reckless borrowing, but cutting the debt, cutting waiting lists, and cutting the cost of living. Those are Labour choices, promised and delivered by this budget, promised and delivered by this Labour government. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
This is a tough and politically risky budget for the Chancellor. Without touching headline tax rates, the Labour Party have raised billions through stealth taxes, which I think Gordon Brown will be proud about, pension changes, and dozens of small charges. Whether you're a pensioner, a parent, a driver, or someone who enjoys a coffee or a drink, Rachel Reeves is taking a slice of your budget to fix hers. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can keep up to date with our latest content on politics, the economy, on leadership, and all sorts of other things. Thank you so much. See you in the next one.